In a small village surrounded by green hills and thick forests, life moved slowly. The people there were simple farmers, fishermen, and shepherds who worked hard every day to feed their families. They lived in wooden cottages with thatched roofs, and their lives revolved around the seasons. The river that flowed through the village was the heart of their community. It gave them water for their crops, fish for their meals, and a place to wash their clothes. But this peaceful village hid a darker side beneath its calm surface. Eliza lived on the edge of the village, far from the others. She was a widow, her husband having passed away 2 winters ago after falling ill. Since then, she had been alone with no children or close family to support her. To survive, she grew herbs in a small garden behind her cottage and sold them to the villagers. Her herbs were known to cure fevers, ease pain, and even help wounds heal faster. Despite her skills, Eliza was not well liked by the people of the Ya village. Some found her strange because she spent so much time alone, tending to her plants and reading old books about nature and healing. Others whispered that she was cursed, blaming her for anything bad that happened in the village. It wasn't just her solitary lifestyle that made people suspicious. Eliza had always been different. She had an uncanny ability to predict changes in the weather, knew which plants could heal and which could harm, and seemed to understand the rhythms of the earth better than anyone else. These talents, instead of earning her respect, only fueled the villagers' fear. They called her names behind her back like witch and curse-bringer and avoided her whenever they could. Children were warned not to go near her cottage, and adults crossed the street to avoid walking past her. Despite their harsh treatment, Eliza tried to stay kind. She offered her herbs freely to those in need, even if they treated her poorly in return. But kindness did little to change their opinions. Instead, it often made things worse. The more she helped, the more they resented her, as though her generosity was some sort of trick. Over time, Eliza learned to keep to herself, avoiding the village unless absolutely necessary. She spent her days working in her garden, talking to her plants, and watching the world from her window. Though lonely, she found comfort in the quiet rhythm of her life. One summer, however, everything changed. The sun blazed down mercilessly, drying up the fields and turning the once fertile soil into cracked, barren earth. The river, which had always flowed steadily, began to shrink. Day by day, its waters receded until it was barely more than a trickle. The villagers grew desperate. Their crops withered, their animals grew weak, and their wells started running dry. Fear settled over the village like a heavy cloud. People gathered in groups, whispering anxiously about what could be causing such misfortune. Some blamed the gods, saying they must have been angered by someone's wrongdoing. Others pointed fingers at each other, accusing neighbors of bringing bad luck upon them all. As the days passed, the whispers grew louder, and soon a name rose above the rest: Eliza. The villagers remembered how different she was, how she seemed to know things no one else did. They recalled the strange way her herbs cured illnesses and how she always seemed untouched by the troubles that plagued everyone else. In their desperation, they convinced themselves that she was the reason for the drought. Someone suggested that Eliza must have angered the spirits of the river, perhaps by using forbidden magic. Another claimed to have seen her performing rituals by the water late at night. Before long, the entire village believed that Eliza was responsible for their suffering. The idea took hold quickly, spreading like wildfire. Fear turned into anger, and anger into hatred. The villagers decided that something had to be done to appease the river spirits and bring back the water. And so they came up with a plan, one that filled them with both dread and determination. They would offer Eliza as a sacrifice, throwing her into the river to cleanse it of whatever curse she had supposedly placed upon it. It was a cruel and desperate act, but in their panic they saw no other option. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the sky in shades of orange and pink, a group of men approached Eliza's cottage. They carried ropes and lanterns, their faces grim and determined. When Eliza opened the door, startled by the knock, they wasted no time. Grabbing her arms, they tied her hands tightly and dragged her outside. She begged them to stop, tears streaming down her face, but they ignored her pleas. "It's for the good of the village," one man muttered, refusing to meet her eyes. Another said nothing at all. His jaw clenched as if trying to block out the sound of her sobs. They marched her to the riverbank where the water had almost disappeared entirely. The ground was dry and cracked, littered with dead leaves and broken branches. The air smelled stale, devoid of the fresh earthy scent that usually accompanied the river. Eliza stumbled as they pushed her forward, her bare feet scraping against the rough ground. She looked around, hoping someone, anyone, would step in to help her. But the faces staring back at her were cold and unyielding. Even those who had once accepted her herbs now stood silently, their expressions blank masks of indifference. At the edge of the river, the men stopped. One of them stepped forward, holding a length of rope. He hesitated for a moment, glancing at the others as if seeking reassurance. Then, taking a deep breath, he prepared to push Eliza into the shallow water. She closed her eyes, bracing herself for what was to come. But just as the man raised his arm, a sudden noise shattered the tense silence. Hooves pounded against the ground, drawing closer with every second. Startled, the villagers turned to see a figure riding toward them at full speed, his cloak billowing behind him, like a shadow come to life. It was Lord William, a wealthy widower who owned a large estate several miles away. Known throughout the region for his intelligence and fairness, he had been traveling through the area when he noticed the commotion by the river. Slowing his horse to a halt, he surveyed the scene, with sharp, piercing eyes. His gaze fell on Eliza, bound and trembling, and then on the villagers, their faces pale with guilt and fear. For a moment no one spoke. The only sounds were the heavy breathing of the horse and the soft rustle of leaves in the breeze. Finally, Lord William broke the silence, his voice cutting through the air like a blade. "What is the meaning of this?" he demanded, his tone leaving no room for argument. The villagers froze, their faces pale and their eyes wide with fear. Lord William's sudden appearance had caught them off guard, and now they stood like statues, unsure of what to do or say. His horse snorted and pawed at the ground, as if sensing the tension in the air. Lord William's sharp gaze swept over the scene, the bound and trembling Eliza, the ropes in the men's hands, and the dried-up riverbed behind them. He dismounted swiftly, his boots hitting the cracked earth, with a firm sound that echoed through the silence. "Explain yourselves," he said again, his voice calm but commanding. The villagers exchanged nervous glances, no one daring to speak. Finally, one of the older men stepped forward, clearing his throat awkwardly. "My lord," he began, bowing slightly to show respect. We did this for the good of the village. The river has dried up, and our crops are failing. We believe she is the cause." Lord William raised an eyebrow, his expression unreadable. "Her?" he asked, pointing to Eliza, who was still standing there, her hands tied tightly. The man nodded quickly. "Yes, my lord, she is cursed. Her presence angers the spirits of the river. If we sacrifice her, the water will return." As he spoke, some of the other villagers murmured in agreement, though their voices were hesitant, as if they themselves weren't entirely convinced by their own words. Eliza, hearing this, shook her head desperately. "No, my lord," she cried out, her voice breaking. "I have done nothing wrong. I am not cursed. Please, you must believe me." Her plea hung in the air, but the villagers avoided looking at her, their eyes fixed on the ground or on Lord William instead. Some shifted uncomfortably, guilt flickering across their faces, but none of them dared to speak up in her defense. Lord William studied the scene for a moment longer, his mind working quickly. Then, without another word, he strode toward Eliza. The villagers parted to let him pass, their unease growing with every step he took. Reaching her, he drew a small dagger from his belt and cut the ropes binding her wrists. The sharp snap of the rope breaking seemed to jolt the crowd out of their stupor. "What are you doing, my lord?" one of the men blurted out, his voice tinged with panic. "She must be sacrificed." Lord William turned to face them, his expression stern. "Sacrificed? On what grounds? Because she is different, because she lives alone, or because you are afraid and need someone to blame?" His words struck a nerve, and the villagers fell silent, unable to meet his piercing gaze. "This woman has done nothing to harm you," he continued, his voice rising slightly. Your fear has made you blind. Instead of working together to solve your problems, you turn on one of your own. Is this the kind of people you wish to be? The rebuke left the villagers speechless. They shuffled awkwardly, some looking down at their feet while others glanced nervously at each other. Lord William didn't wait for a response. Turning back to Eliza, he gently placed a hand on her shoulder. "Are you hurt?" he asked softly. She shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "No, my lord," she whispered. "But I don't know what to do. They won't listen to me." Lord William's jaw tightened, and for a moment he looked as though he wanted to say something more to the villagers. But then he seemed to think better of it. Instead, he turned to Eliza and spoke in a low, steady voice. "You will come with me," he said firmly. "You cannot stay here if these people refuse to see reason." Eliza hesitated, unsure of what to say. She had never expected anyone to stand up for her, let alone a man of such high status. "But where will I go?" she asked, her voice trembling. "To my estate," Lord William replied simply. "It is safe there, and you will not be treated this way again." Before Eliza could protest further, he turned back to the villagers. "If any of you try to harm her again, you will answer to me," he warned, his tone leaving no room for argument. The villagers nodded mutely, too ashamed to argue. With that, Lord William helped Eliza onto his horse, mounting behind her and guiding the animal away from the river bank. As they rode away, Eliza clung to the edge of the saddle, her heart racing. She couldn't believe what had just happened. Only moments ago she had been facing certain death, and now she was being taken to safety by a man she barely knew. "Why did you save me?" she asked finally, her voice barely above a whisper. Lord William hesitated before answering. "Because it was the right thing to do," he said simply. "And because I know what it's like to lose someone you love and be judged unfairly." Eliza turned to look at him, surprised by his words. Until now she had only known Lord William by reputation, a wealthy widower who kept mostly to himself. She had heard stories about how kind and fair he was, but she had never imagined meeting him, let alone being saved by him. "Thank you," she said softly, her voice thick with emotion. "I don't know how I can ever repay you." "There is no need for repayment," Lord William replied, his tone gentle. "Just promise me one thing, that you will not let their cruelty break you. You are stronger than they realize." Eliza nodded, though she wasn't sure she believed him. After years of being ostracized and blamed for things beyond her control, it was hard to feel strong. But there was something about Lord William's presence that gave her hope, a sense that maybe, just maybe, things could get better. The ride to his estate was long and quiet, broken only by the rhythmic sound of the horses' hooves against the dirt road. As they traveled, Eliza found herself glancing back at the village, which grew smaller and smaller with each passing mile. She felt a strange mix of sadness and relief. Sadness for the life she was leaving behind, and relief at escaping the hostility that had surrounded her for so long. Eventually, the landscape changed, giving way to rolling green fields and neatly tended gardens. In the distance, she could see the outline of a grand manor house, its windows glowing warmly in the fading light of the evening. When they arrived, Lord William helped her down from the horse and led her inside. The interior of the estate was as impressive as its exterior, with high ceilings, polished wooden floors, and walls adorned with paintings and tapestries. Servants bustled about, bowing respectfully as their master entered. Despite the luxury, Eliza felt out of place, her simple clothes and worn hands a stark contrast to the opulence around her. Sensing her discomfort, Lord William smiled reassuringly. "You are welcome here," he said. "Do not worry about fitting in. Just rest and recover." That night, after being shown to a comfortable guest room, Eliza lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Her mind raced with thoughts of the day's events, the villagers' accusations, Lord William's intervention, and the uncertainty of what lay ahead. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to dream of a different life, one where she wasn't feared or hated, but accepted and valued. Though she didn't know it yet, this moment marked the beginning of a new chapter, one that would change her life in ways she could never have imagined. The next morning, Eliza woke up to the sound of birds chirping outside her window. For a moment she lay still, trying to remember where she was. The softness of the bed beneath her and the faint scent of lavender in the air were unfamiliar comforts. Then it all came rushing back. The villagers by the river, the ropes binding her hands, and Lord William riding in like a shadow cast by fate itself. She sat up slowly, her heart pounding as she realized she was safe, at least for now. A gentle knock on the door startled her. Before she could respond, a young maid entered carrying a tray with breakfast. "Good morning, miss," the girl said with a warm smile. "Lord William asked me to bring this to you. He hopes you slept well." Eliza nodded, feeling a lump rise in her throat. No one had ever treated her so kindly before. The maid set the tray down on a small table near the window and curtsied before leaving. Eliza looked at the food, a bowl of fresh porridge topped with honey, slices of buttered bread, and a cup of steaming herbal tea. It was more than she had eaten in days, maybe even weeks. She ate slowly, savoring every bite, but her mind kept drifting back to the events of the previous day. Later that morning, Lord William sent for her. When she arrived in the grand sitting room, he was standing by the fireplace gazing thoughtfully into the flames. Hearing her footsteps, he turned and gestured for her to sit. "I trust you are feeling better?" he asked, his tone gentle yet firm. Eliza nodded, clutching her hands tightly in her lap. "Yes, my lord. Thank you for everything." He studied her for a moment, his sharp eyes missing nothing. The way her shoulders slumped under the weight of years of loneliness, the faint lines of worry etched into her face. "You don't have to thank me," he said finally. "But I do want to understand what happened. Tell me about your life in the village, how they came to treat you so cruelly." Eliza hesitated, unsure where to begin. Her story wasn't an easy one to tell, filled as it was with pain and rejection. But something about Lord William's calm demeanor made her feel safe. Taking a deep breath, she began to speak. She told him about her husband who had died 2 winters ago after falling ill. How she had been left alone with no family to support her. How she had tried to make ends meet by growing herbs and selling them to the villagers. At first they had accepted her help, grateful for her knowledge. But over time, their gratitude turned to suspicion. They whispered behind her back, calling her names like witch and curse-bringer. Eventually they stopped buying her herbs altogether, leaving her struggling to survive. As she spoke, Lord William listened intently, his expression unreadable. When she finished, there was a long pause. Then he sighed deeply, shaking his head. "Their fear has blinded them," he said quietly. "They see only what they wish to believe, not the truth." Eliza nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. "I just don't understand why they hate me so much," she admitted, her voice trembling. "All I ever wanted was to help." Lord William leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "Sometimes people lash out because they are afraid of things they cannot control," he explained. "Your knowledge of plants, your ability to heal, it frightens them. And when the drought hit, they needed someone to blame. You were an easy target." His words struck a chord within her, and for the first time, she saw her situation from a different perspective. It didn't make the pain any less real, but it helped her understand why it had happened. For the rest of the day, Lord William showed her around the estate. He introduced her to the servants, who greeted her warmly despite her humble appearance. He took her to the gardens, where rows of vegetables and herbs grew in neat patches. Seeing them reminded her of her own garden back in the village, and for a moment she felt a pang of homesickness. But these gardens were far larger and better cared for, tended by skilled hands. "If you'd like," Lord William said, noticing her interest, "you can work here. Share your knowledge with us. We could use someone with your skills." Eliza blinked in surprise. "You would let me do that?" she asked, hardly daring to believe him. Lord William smiled, a rare but genuine expression that softened his usually stern features. Of course. Why should your talents go to waste? Besides, I think it might do you good to have something to focus on. Gratitude welled up inside her, and she found herself smiling back for the first time in what felt like forever. Over dinner, that evening they talked more openly than they had before. Lord William shared stories of his late wife, a kind and intelligent woman who had passed away several years earlier. He spoke of how much he missed her and how lonely he had been since her death. Eliza listened quietly, sensing the depth of his sorrow. In turn, she told him about her own grief, about the emptiness that had settled over her life after losing her husband. Their conversation flowed easily, each finding solace in the other's understanding. As the meal drew to a close, Lord William hesitated, as if debating whether or not to say something. Finally, he cleared his throat and spoke. Eliza, I know we've only just met, but I feel drawn to you. There is a connection between us, one that I haven't felt in a very long time. He paused, searching her face for a reaction. I don't wish to rush you or pressure you in any way, but I must ask, would you consider staying here permanently, as my wife? Eliza stared at him, stunned. She hadn't expected such a proposal, especially not so soon. Her mind raced with questions. Could she truly start over? Would marrying him mean leaving behind the last remnants of her old life? And most importantly, did she dare to trust him? Sensing her uncertainty, Lord William reached across the table and took her hand. You need not answer right away, he said gently. Take your time to think it over. But know this, I care for you deeply and I vow to protect you from those who seek to harm you. That night, Eliza lay awake once again, her thoughts swirling. The idea of marriage frightened her, not because of Lord William himself, he had shown nothing but kindness, but because it meant opening her heart to someone new. Yet the alternative, returning to the village or wandering aimlessly, was unthinkable. Slowly, she began to imagine what life might be like as his wife. She pictured mornings spent tending to the gardens, evenings filled with quiet conversations by the fire. Most of all, she imagined a future where she was no longer alone, where she belonged somewhere, and to someone. By the time dawn broke, she had made her decision. Rising from the bed, she dressed quickly and made her way to the dining hall, where Lord William was already seated, reading a book. When he saw her, he closed it and stood, his expression hopeful but guarded. My lord, she began, her voice steady despite the butterflies in her stomach. I have thought about your offer, and I accept. If you still wish it, I will become your wife. Relief washed over Lord Waters' face, followed by a look of pure joy. Are you certain? He asked, wanting to be sure she wasn't acting out of obligation. Eliza nodded firmly. Yes, I believe we can find happiness together. With that, Lord William stepped forward and took her hands in his. Then let us begin our new life today, he said, his voice filled with determination. Within hours, arrangements were made, and by sunset they stood before a priest in the estate's chapel, exchanging vows in a quiet ceremony attended only by the household staff. News of their marriage spread quickly through the region, reaching the ears of the villagers. Some were shocked, others jealous, and a few even envious of Eliza's sudden change in fortune. But none dared to challenge Lord William's decision. Over time, the hostility toward Eliza faded, replaced by a grudging respect. Under Lord William's guidance, the villagers worked together to restore the river, digging new channels and planting trees along its banks. Slowly but surely the water returned, bringing life back to the land. As for Eliza, she embraced her role as mistress of the estate, using her knowledge of plants to improve the gardens and teach others. Together, she and Lord William built not only a home, but also a partnership founded on trust, love, and mutual respect. Though scars from her past remained, they no longer defined her. Instead, she became a symbol of resilience and hope, proving that even in the darkest moments, light can prevail. And in Lord William, she found not just a protector, but a true companion. someone who saw her for who she really was, a strong, kind-hearted woman deserving of love and happiness. The days following their quiet wedding ceremony passed quickly for Eliza and Lord William. Life at the estate settled into a comfortable rhythm, one that brought both joy and purpose to Eliza's once lonely existence. Each morning, she woke, early to tend to the gardens, her hands brushing against leaves and soil as if reconnecting with an old friend. The estate's gardeners, initially unsure how to treat her, soon warmed up to her gentle nature and vast knowledge of plants. Under her guidance, they began planting new herbs and flowers, transforming the already beautiful grounds into something even more vibrant and alive. Lord William watched her from afar sometimes, marveling at how effortlessly she seemed to fit into his world. Though he had always been a man of authority and discipline, he found himself softening in her presence. Her laughter echoed through the halls of the estate, bringing warmth to rooms that had felt empty for years. In turn, Eliza discovered sides of him she hadn't expected: his dry sense of humor, his love for books, and his quiet moments of reflection when he thought no one was looking. Together, they formed a bond that grew stronger with each passing. Dorsat one afternoon as Eliza worked in the garden, she noticed a group of villagers approaching the estate gates. At first she felt a pang of fear, memories of the riverbank flooding back. But these people carried no ropes or weapons. Instead, they held baskets filled with fresh produce and handmade goods. One of the men stepped forward hesitantly, removing his hat as a sign of respect. "My lady," he said, addressing Eliza directly, we came to apologize." Eliza blinked in surprise, unsure what to say. She glanced toward the house, where Lord William stood on the balcony above, watching silently. Encouraged by his calm demeanor, she turned back to the villagers. "Apologize?" she repeated softly. The man nodded, his face flushed with shame. "For what we did to you, and it was wrong. We let our fear cloud our judgment. Please forgive us." Her heart ached as she looked at them. The same faces that had once accused her of being cursed now stood before her, humbled and remorseful. Part of her wanted to hold on to the anger and pain, to make them feel the weight of what they had done. But another part, the part that had learned kindness despite cruelty, urged her to forgive. Taking a deep breath, she spoke. "I accept your apology," she said simply, "but I ask only one thing, that you do not treat others as you treated me. Fear should never lead to hate." The villagers nodded earnestly, promising to change. They left shortly after, leaving behind their gifts as a token of goodwill. That evening, as Eliza recounted the encounter to Lord William, he smiled proudly. "You have a strength I admire," he told her. "To forgive when forgiveness is hardest, that takes courage." Eliza blushed at his words, but felt a small spark of pride. For so long, she had seen herself as weak, a victim of circumstance. Now she was beginning to see herself differently, as someone capable of growth and resilience. As weeks turned into months, life in the village slowly improved. The drought ended, and the river flowed steadily once more, its waters nourishing the fields and filling the wells. Crops grew tall and green, and animals grazed happily in the pastures. With Lord William's encouragement, the villagers worked together to repair the damage caused by the drought. They dug new irrigation channels, planted trees along the riverbanks to prevent erosion, and shared resources to ensure everyone had enough to survive. Slowly but surely, trust began to rebuild, not just between the villagers and Eliza, but among themselves as well. Eliza played a key role in this transformation. Using her knowledge of herbs, she taught the villagers how to create remedies for common ailments, ensuring they would rely less on superstition and more on practical solutions. She also helped establish a small market within the village, where people could trade goods and services without fear of exploitation. Her efforts earned her not just gratitude but genuine respect. The whispers that had once followed her were replaced by smiles and nods of acknowledgement. Children who had once been warned to stay away from her now ran to greet her when she visited the village, their laughter ringing in her ears like music. Despite these changes, Eliza remained humble. She knew that while the villagers' attitudes toward her had shifted, old fears and prejudices could easily resurface. Still, she refused to let those fears dictate her actions. Instead, she focused on building connections, showing kindness even to those who still eyed her warily. Over time, her patience paid off. Even the most stubborn skeptics began to see her for who she truly was, a woman of compassion and wisdom, someone who cared deeply about the welfare of others. Meanwhile, Lord William continued to support her in every way he could. He encouraged her to take on more responsibilities at the estate, trusting her judgment and valuing her input. Together, they made decisions that benefited not just their household, but the entire community. When winter arrived, they organized food drives to ensure no family went hungry. During spring planting season, they provided seeds and tools to those in need. Their generosity became a cornerstone of life in the region, earning them widespread admiration. Yet despite all the progress, challenges remained. Some villagers still harbored doubts about Eliza, whispering behind closed doors about her strange abilities. Others resented Lord William for his wealth and influence, believing he meddled too much in village affairs. These tensions simmered beneath the surface, threatening to boil over at any moment. But Eliza and Lord William faced them head-on, refusing to let negativity undermine the work they had done. One particularly tense incident occurred during a town meeting held to discuss plans for expanding the irrigation system. A few outspoken villagers argued against the proposal, claiming it favored certain families over others. Voices grew louder, tempers flared, and for a moment, it seemed as though the fragile peace might shatter. Sensing the tension, Eliza stepped forward, her voice steady and clear. "This project is not about favoritism," she said. "It is about survival, for all of us. If we do not work together, the next drought will destroy everything we have built." Her words resonated with many in the crowd, calming the rising tide of anger. Lord William added his own reassurances, promising transparency and fairness in the distribution of resources. By the end of the meeting, the majority of the villagers agreed to move forward with the plan, though some remained skeptical. It was a small victory, but an important one, a reminder that unity required constant effort and compromise. As the year drew to a close, Eliza reflected on how far she had come. From being an outcast on the brink of death to becoming a respected figure in the community, her journey had been nothing short of miraculous. Yet she knew none of it would have been possible without Lord William's unwavering support. Their partnership was built on mutual trust and understanding, qualities that strengthened their bond with each passing day. On a cold December evening, as snow blanketed the estate and the scent of pine filled the air, Lord William surprised Eliza with a gift, a beautifully crafted locket containing a miniature portrait of the two of them. "To remind you," he said softly, "that no matter what happens, you are never alone again." Tears welled up in her eyes as she clasped it around her neck, feeling the weight of his promise settle warmly over her heart. That night, as they sat by the fire sharing stories of their childhoods, Eliza realized something profound. Happiness wasn't about forgetting the past or erasing pain. It was about finding meaning in it, using it to grow stronger and wiser. And in Lord William, she had found not just a protector but a partner, someone who saw her scars and loved her anyway. Together, they had created a life neither of them could have imagined, a life filled with hope, purpose, and love. As the seasons changed and another year began, life at the estate and in the village continued to flourish. Eliza and Lord William's efforts to improve the community bore fruit in ways neither of them had fully anticipated. The villagers, inspired by their example, started working together more closely than ever before. They formed committees to manage resources, organized festivals to celebrate harvests, and even set aside funds to help families struggling through hard times. Slowly but surely, the village transformed from a place of fear and division into one of cooperation and unity. Eliza found herself at the center of this transformation, though she never sought the spotlight. Her quiet strength and unwavering kindness earned her not just respect but genuine affection. People no longer saw her as an outsider or someone to be feared. Instead, they viewed her as a friend, a healer, and a leader. Mothers brought their sick children to her for herbal remedies. Farmers sought her advice on crop rotation, and young women asked for guidance on gardening and cooking. She became a bridge between the villagers and Lord William, helping them understand each other better and fostering trust where there had once been suspicion. Despite her growing role in the community, Eliza remained humble. She knew that while many had come to accept her, some still harbored doubts. There were moments when old prejudices resurfaced, whispers behind her back, sidelong glances when she walked through the market, but she chose not to dwell on them. Instead, she focused on what mattered most: building connections, showing compassion, and proving through her actions that she was worthy of their trust. Over time, even the skeptics softened, won over by her patience and generosity. Lord William, too, played a vital part in mending the fractured relationship between the villagers and the estate. He made it a point to visit the village regularly, attending meetings, listening to concerns, and offering solutions without imposing his will. Unlike other wealthy landowners in the region, who ruled with iron fists and expected blind obedience, he treated the villagers as equals. His fairness and openness earned him their loyalty, and they began to see him not as a distant lord but as a man who truly cared about their well-being. One spring morning, as Eliza tended to the estate gardens, Lord William approached her with a thoughtful expression. "I've been thinking," he said, leaning against the wooden fence that bordered the flower beds, "about how much you've done for the village and how much I owe you. You've brought light to places I couldn't reach." Eliza looked up, surprised by his words. "You don't owe me anything," she replied softly. "We're partners, aren't we? What I do because I believe in it." He smiled, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "Still, I want to do something special, something that honors your contributions. I'm planning to build a schoolhouse for the children, a place where they can learn to read, write, and think critically. And I'd like you to oversee its construction and operation." Eliza stared at him, stunned. A schoolhouse? For the village children? It was an idea so bold, so generous, that it took her breath away. "But why me?" she asked after a moment, her voice tinged with uncertainty. "I'm not a teacher. I wouldn't know where to begin." Lord William shook his head firmly. "You underestimate yourself. Your knowledge, your patience, your ability to connect with people. You're perfect for this task. Besides, we can hire tutors and educators to assist you. All I need is your vision and leadership." His confidence in her was overwhelming, and for a moment, she felt tears prick her eyes. No one had ever believed in her so completely before. The next few months, the project consumed much of Eliza's time and energy. She worked tirelessly alongside the villagers, helping design the schoolhouse and gather materials. Children followed her around excitedly, asking questions about what they would learn and whether they could bring their pets to class. Parents expressed their gratitude, promising to contribute whatever they could, whether it was labor, supplies, or simply prayers. Seeing the entire community rally behind the idea filled Eliza with a sense of purpose she had never known before. When the schoolhouse finally opened its doors, it was a day of celebration. Colorful banners fluttered in the breeze and tables groaned under the weight of food donated by local families. Children ran wild, laughing and shouting as they explored their new classroom. Inside, rows of desks stood ready, chalkboards gleamed, freshly painted, and shelves lined with books promised endless adventures. As Eliza stood at the front of the room addressing the crowd gathered to mark the occasion, she felt a lump rise in her throat. "This schoolhouse belongs to all of us," she said, her voice steady despite the emotion swelling within her. "It is a symbol of hope, for our children, for our future, and for the kind of world we want to create. Let us use it wisely, filling it not just with lessons, but with love and understanding." Her words were met with cheers and applause, and for the first time in her life, Eliza felt truly seen, not as a widow, not as a supposed witch, but as someone who mattered deeply to the people around her. The success of the schoolhouse further solidified Eliza's position in the community. Parents trusted her to guide their children, teachers sought her advice, and students adored her. Yet even as her influence grew, She remained grounded, always remembering the hardships that had shaped her. She often visited the poorest families in the village, bringing food, medicine, and encouragement. She listened to their stories, shared their joys and sorrows, and reminded them that they were not alone. Meanwhile, Lord William continued to support her in every way he could. Their partnership deepened with each passing day, built on a foundation of mutual respect and admiration. Though they came from different worlds, they complemented each other perfectly. Where Eliza was gentle and nurturing, Lord William was decisive and protective. Together they balanced each other out, creating a harmony that benefited everyone around them. One evening, as they strolled through the estate gardens hand in hand, Lord William turned to Eliza with a reflective look in his eyes. "Do you remember the first time we met?" he asked, a hint of amusement in his voice. Eliza chuckled softly. "How could I forget? You rode in like a knight in shining armor, saving me from those who wished me harm." He laughed, squeezing her hand lightly. "And now here we are years later, married and running an entire estate together. Life has a funny way of surprising us, doesn't it?" "It certainly does," Eliza agreed, gazing up at him fondly. "But I wouldn't change a thing. Everything that happened, the pain, the fear, the struggles, it led me to you, and to this life we've built together." Her words hung in the air, simple yet profound, carrying the weight of all they had endured and achieved. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the garden in shades of gold and pink, they stood in silence, content simply to be in each other's presence. Around them, the world felt peaceful, a stark contrast to the chaos they had faced in the past. They knew challenges would arise again. Life was unpredictable and no amount of planning could prevent storms from coming. But they also knew they were stronger together, capable of weathering whatever lay ahead. That night, as they sat by the fire sharing stories of their youth, Eliza realized something important. Happiness wasn't about escaping hardship or achieving perfection. It was about finding meaning in the journey, embracing both the highs and the lows, and cherishing the people who walked beside you along the way. And in Lord William, she had found not just a partner, but a true companion, someone who understood her heart and soul in ways few others ever could. Together, they had created a life rooted in love, kindness, and resilience, a life that inspired those around them to strive for something greater. In doing so, they proved that even in the darkest moments light could prevail, and that sometimes salvation came not in the form of grand gestures but in the quiet, steadfast presence of someone who refused to give up on you. Years passed, and the village continued to thrive under the care of Eliza and Lord William. The schoolhouse became a cornerstone of the community, a place where children learned not only reading and writing, but also kindness, empathy, and teamwork. Older villagers often joined evening classes, eager to improve their skills or simply share stories with one another. The estate gardens flourished as well, producing enough herbs and vegetables to feed everyone during tough times. What had once been a fractured, fearful village was now a close-knit community, bound by trust and mutual support. Eliza's role in this transformation earned her a special place in the hearts of the villagers. Mothers sought her advice on raising, children farmers asked for tips on improving their crops, and young couples invited her to bless their weddings. She was no longer just the widow or the healer. She was simply Eliza, a beloved figure who had become part of their lives in ways they never imagined. Even those who had once doubted her came to see her as a source of strength and wisdom, someone who could always be relied upon in times of need. Her quiet determination and unwavering compassion inspired others to follow her example, creating a ripple effect of positivity throughout the region. Lord William, too, remained deeply involved in the village's affairs. Though he still managed his estate with precision and care, he made it a point to prioritize the needs of the community. He invested in infrastructure projects such as building new roads and repairing old bridges, ensuring that trade routes stayed open and accessible. He also introduced programs to help struggling families, offering loans with low interest rates and providing work opportunities on the estate. His generosity didn't go unnoticed. People spoke of him with admiration, calling him a fair and compassionate leader who truly cared about their welfare. Yet despite their success, Eliza and Lord William never lost sight of the struggles that had shaped them. They understood that while progress was important, it wasn't permanent. Hardships could return at any moment, testing the bonds they had worked so hard to build. This awareness kept them grounded, reminding them to remain vigilant and compassionate. Whenever tensions arose between neighbors or disputes threatened to disrupt harmony, they stepped in quickly, mediating conflicts and encouraging open dialogue. Their presence served as a calming force, helping to prevent small disagreements from escalating into larger problems. One autumn morning, as golden leaves swirled in the breeze, news arrived that sent shockwaves through the village. A neighboring lord, known for his greed and cruelty, had begun seizing land from nearby settlements, claiming they owed him taxes they couldn't possibly pay. Fear spread among the villagers, many of whom worried they might be next. Rumors circulated about soldiers marching toward their borders ready to take what little they had left. Panic set in, and for a brief moment, it seemed as though the unity they had built might crumble under the weight of uncertainty. Eliza and Lord William wasted no time addressing the situation. Gathering the villagers in the town square, they assured them that they would face this challenge together. "We will not let fear divide us," Lord William declared, his voice steady and commanding. "If we stand united, no outsider can break us." Eliza added her own words of encouragement, urging everyone to stay calm and trust in their ability to overcome adversity. Together they devised a plan. Lord William would travel to the neighboring lord's castle to negotiate peace, while Eliza stayed behind to organize defenses and ensure supplies were stockpiled in case of an attack. The days leading up to Lord D. William's departure were tense, filled with whispered prayers and restless nights. Many feared he wouldn't return, knowing how ruthless the other lord could be. But Eliza refused to let despair take hold. She visited every home, offering comfort and reassurance, reminding people of their strength and resilience. Under her guidance, the villagers fortified their boundaries, dug trenches, and prepared makeshift weapons. Women and children gathered food and water, while men practiced drills to defend their homes. Though fear lingered, it was tempered by a sense of purpose, a belief that they could protect what they had built if they worked together. When Lord William finally returned, weary but triumphant, the entire village erupted in cheers. Through careful negotiation, he had managed to secure a truce with the neighboring lord, convincing him to abandon his plans of expansion. It wasn't an easy task. There were moments when talks nearly broke down, but his persistence and diplomacy paid off. The agreement ensured the safety of the village for years to come, allowing its people to focus on growth rather than survival. That evening, a grand feast was held in celebration. Tables groaned under the weight of roasted meats, fresh bread and hearty stews, while music and laughter filled the air. Villagers danced around bonfires, their faces glowing with relief and joy. At the center of it all stood Eliza and Lord William, side by side, watching over the scene with pride and gratitude. They knew the road ahead wouldn't always be smooth, but they also knew they had something precious, a community that believed in itself and in each other. Over time, the story of their village spread far beyond its borders, inspiring others to adopt similar practices. Travelers passing through shared tales of a place where kindness ruled over cruelty, where cooperation triumphed over conflict. Some even chose to settle there, drawn by the promise of a better life. With each new arrival, the village grew stronger, its spirit unyielding in the face of challenges. As the years went by, Eliza and Lord William grew older, their hair streaked with silver and their steps slower than before. Yet their love for each other, and for the people around them, remained as strong as ever. They spent their evenings sitting by the fire, recounting memories and marveling at how much the world had changed since their early days together. Children and grandchildren filled their home with laughter, ensuring that their legacy would live on long after they were gone. On a quiet winter night, as snow blanketed the estate and the scent of pine filled the air, Eliza sat alone in the garden, gazing at the stars. She thought about the journey she had taken, the pain, the fear, the sacrifices, and how it had led her here, to a place of peace and belonging. Tears welled up in her eyes, but they were tears of gratitude, not sadness. She had faced darkness and emerged stronger, proving to herself and to the world that even in the hardest moments, light could prevail. When Lord William found her there, wrapped in a thick shawl, he smiled softly. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, sitting beside her. Eliza turned to him, her expression serene. "About everything," she replied. "About how far we've come, and how lucky I am to have you by my side." He took her hand in his, squeezing it gently. "The luck is mine," he said simply. "You've taught me what it means to truly live." They sat in silence for a while, content to be together beneath the vast, starry sky. Around them, the world slept peacefully, unaware of the battles fought and won, the lives touched and transformed. In that moment, Eliza realized something profound. Happiness wasn't about escaping hardship or achieving perfection. It was about finding meaning in the journey, embracing both the highs and the lows, and cherishing the people who walked beside you along the way. And so their story continued not as one of mere survival but of triumph, resilience, and love. Through their actions, they had shown that even in the darkest corners of the human experience, hope could bloom like a flower breaking through cracked earth. Together, Eliza and Lord William had created a legacy that would endure for generations, a testament to the power of compassion, unity, and unwavering faith in the goodness of others.